Okay, great. All right, well, good to be here today. Just moving to the start of the presentation here. So just the general corporate stuff at the start there. So this is just an investment highlight section here. So we have a number of projects. We have in New South Wales, we have the Barraba Copper Zinc Project. We also have some copper base metals projects in the Northern Territory. I'll talk about them a little bit later. Of course, you mentioned the Springdale Graphite Project. That was the subject of the announcement last week. That's in Western Australia. And we have the Santa Teresa Gold Project in Mexico, where we've just finalised drilling recently, and we're waiting on assays at the moment. So we have a number of highly prospective projects, all in Tier 1 mining jurisdictions. We leveraged two basic themes here, copper being obviously the biggest EV metal, and graphite also having a space or a place in the EV sector. And then precious metals, of course, have performed very well in the recent history. We've got a pretty attractive company valuation at the moment, only about $20 million market cap. So plenty of upside there for, price catalysts as they occur, which we are certainly working towards achieving. Just looking at Springdale first and the resource there. So what we have at Springdale is we have quite a near surface, thick zones of graphite. We have a JORC compliant resource of 15.6 million tonnes at 6% total graphitic carbon. But the high grade zone of 2.6 million tonnes at 17.5% TGC, that is the area where the material has come from that we've tested recently. And it's that area of the deposit that has this quite unique, extremely fine, yet platy graphite. And it was our interest in that and its potential to have battery anode applications that led us to do the metallurgical test work, which of course we released last week, and I'll go into that in more detail. We have some very high grade intersections there, and as I said, some very thick intersections too. So what you have now is you have a deposit that's very close to surface, very thick zones of mineralisation, and so this should be quite easy to mine, low cost open pit should it be developed. It's also on freehold land, very close to infrastructure and ports, sealed roads, so CapEx would also be quite low, we would expect, in developing this project. So very good from both an OPEX and a CapEx perspective from the information we have at hand at present. Looking at the results from last week that you mentioned earlier, so we've been doing test work on the graphite, metallurgical test work for the last 12 months. The initial process was to see if we could create a high-grade concentrate. We were able to achieve that last year. This year we then moved on to creating a bulk sample of that. That takes quite a bit of time because the cells in the labs are quite small, so you have to run numerous batches. But we generated the bulk sample around about July, sent that over to a specialist testing facility in Germany, Pro Graphite, where they tested the material for the three sort of key processes in manufacture of battery anode precursor material, which is first of all to micronize the product, because you start out with very small flakes in for spheronization. So you have to micronize down to around about 15 microns or 20 microns. They're the two starting sizes for input into spheronization. Now, one of the big advantages for our project is that we start off with very, very small graphite to start off with. So 2/3 of our graphite is roughly below around about 35 microns. And so, unsurprisingly, I suppose, the material performed exceptionally well in micronization. So it micronized easily and with low energy input. And that's quite important because if you're starting with a larger flake of graphite and trying to micronize it down to these, the spec sizes that you need to commence spheronization of 15 to 20 microns, which is very small, it requires a lot of energy a lot of the time because these graphite flakes self-lubricate basically as you're trying to micronize them or grind them down to that size. And so having ours starting out at a very small flake size meant that it micronized very easily, very nicely, and with low energy inputs. We then moved on to the spheronization, and it spheronized very well. And the graphic on the side of this picture here is around about, I think, a 1200 times zoom in on an electron microscope showing those flakes there. This is a 20 micron product of spheronized graphite, and that's what it looks like. And that's pretty nice spheronized graphite too. The sizes are relatively consistent, and that enables them to package in nicely into a reasonably dense product in the anode, which is what you want. Also, we tested for, moving on there to purification first. Then the final step in the benchmark testing for battery anode material is to purify. Now, the general benchmark for battery anode material is 99.95% purity. And we purified using two processes, one a caustic or sodium hydroxide caustic roast, basically. That purified to 99.96%. And then we also purified using hydrofluoric acid, which is the method of purification generally used in China. It's also being used by some other companies like CRL, I believe, at their facility in the US. And that achieved 99.99% purification. So both of those processes achieved above benchmark purification for our product, which was excellent news. Also, when we tested the gangue material, so the balance of the material there, the results there were also good, indicating that essentially all key elements, or all the key deleterious elements that you don't want in the gangue material and that you don't want in the battery anode were present in low quantities. So also good there. So very exciting results there. This is a first step, of course, and we need to go back and test more material. We also need to try to optimize certain things where we want to improve. The tap density, or the density of the product, was not as high as it could be. Certainly wasn't low, but we do want to improve further from where we are. And also the yield in the process was a little low as well. Now, that's primarily due to the fact that we have a lot of very, very small flake, which actually rejects on the undersize coming into the process. Now, for us, that's not really going to be waste material, because that very small graphite can be used for other things, other markets, basically, lubricants and other products. So we'll optimize that moving forward, so that we reject the undersize before it goes into the spheronization process. And that should bring the yield up quite substantially. The graphite also performed very well in jet milled testing. Now, jet milled is an industrial product. It's used for a number of high value applications. Some of them are in insulation, some of them are in lubrication. But the good thing about this is that you're never going to have a graphite deposit that produces 100% battery anode material. And so you need to make sure that you have other products that are saleable for value consideration, so that the overall economics of the project are going to be robust. So having jet milled, another high value product available to us from the deposit, is a big plus. And as we move forward, towards feasibility studies in the future, that's where we see the value of that. We're also in discussions at the moment with a number of parties who've become interested in the project as the graphite project this is, as they've seen the test results coming out over the last 12 months. And nothing's definitive there at the moment, but those discussions are ongoing. There. Oh gosh. Hang on here for a second.
All good there, Matt?
Yeah, it's just everything's decided to start working here on me.
Bit frozen there.
I had a... Has that moved up now?
Yes, excellent.
Yep. Okay, apologies for that. Just had some programs that opened in the background there all by themselves. Now, you've probably heard a bit about the EV market from some of the other presenters here today. So obviously there's a big push into EVs globally, phasing out of internal combustion engines. By 2022, there's going to be 500 different types of EVs in the market, and by 2030, a lot of countries are phasing out internal combustion engines altogether. So the demand's really ramping up there, as you see on those graphs on the side, in terms of demand for anode material, which is the graphite, and EV volumes cumulatively out in the market. And one thing that's very interesting here that I think a lot of investors don't understand is what goes into a lithium-ion battery. And if you look at the graphic there on the left, you see the graphite is 53.8%. So the anode is the biggest part of a lithium-ion battery, and the anode is where all this battery anode material, the graphite, goes. So that's what's generating the demand, the increase in demand for graphite. Growth of 700% by 2025 and much more moving forward as the market becomes more and more EV centric. So great spot to be in if you have battery anode material. Early indications are very positive for the project, and we'll be moving on to do more metallurgical test work, some more drilling in the future as well for further resource definition and potentially resource growth as well. Just looking at the Barraba Copper Project in New South Wales, this is a brownfields project there. It was historically mined at very high grades. There's multiple lodes there, 3 lodes that we know of. They were mined at an average of 5% copper. And there's also the Murchison mine on the side as well, which mined historically at 3%. The historic Gulf Creek copper mine, though, is our main target on this licence. That deposit's open at depth and along strike. It also contains zinc, which was not payable at the time of mining, but in the historical mining records, the zinc is noted as being 1 to 1.5 times the copper grades. So you could have a deposit here with an average grade of 5% copper and 5% or 5% plus zinc. That would be very economic if you could find significant quantities of it, and that's what we want to go out and explore for. We've got drill holes planned to intercept the lodes from the historic mining below where the mining ended. I think it's important to note here that the mining didn't cease at the time that it did stop because of lack of economic ore in front of the miners. It ceased because it flooded, and the flooding bankrupted the mining company at that stage, and it's sat idle since. So essentially what we're trying to do here is get out and drill the project. The project does have a native title claim over the area of the Gulf Creek historic mine, and we've been working through that process with the native title claimants and their lawyers over the last 12 months. It has been impacted quite significantly by delays due to COVID, where there's been inability for the lawyers to meet with the native title claimants due to basically regional travel restrictions and issues around COVID transmission. So obviously that's still an issue right now in New South Wales, but we're coming to the end of the process. We're engaged in an arbitration process with them at the moment as well to essentially help reach a resolution. And I just want to say that there hasn't actually been any problem with the native title claimants themselves. It's just the process and the fact that we've had the COVID issue and so on and so forth. So we are hoping to get that resolved in the next 3 to 6 months and then commence drilling pretty much immediately after that. It's a very exciting project. I'm very, very excited to get out there and drill this based on those historical grades and the fact that we know where the mine is, we know where to target our drill holes. So it's about as confident as you can be about exploration. We also have a couple of projects in the Northern Territory as well, a number of projects we picked up there in about Q2 of this year. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get up there on the ground at the moment. We had a trip planned in early Q3, but that was shut down when the borders closed again. And right now at the moment, things are very uncertain in Australia on cross-border movements because everybody's worried about further outbreaks of Delta, etc. So we're hoping to get there as soon as we can, and certainly I'm going to try and get up there in Q4. So a number of good projects up there. This is the Paradise Wells one that I'm looking at the moment. So surface samples there of copper up to 8.88%, gold chips there of 2.15 grams per tonne. It's reasonably underexplored, and what we want to do is go up there and start that exploration in earnest on what are some very encouraging results so far. Similar thing down here at Ungulabi. So Ungulabi has been drilled historically. The best drilling hole they had there was 36.5 metres at 1% copper, 1.7% zinc. That's a good grade over a thick intersection there. So what we'll be able to go up and do here is field work to start off with, then geophysics to target drill holes and plan drill holes, and then commence drilling on that to follow up, particularly on that very good intersection there of 36.5 metres at 1% plus copper equivalent. It's in the same geological setting as quite a good deposit there, the Jervois copper deposit, or Jervois, I'm not sure how they pronounce it. But that has 426,000 tonnes of contained copper in it at a grade of about 2%. So certainly it is a copper region, and it looks like a very interesting project. We're just trying to get up there on the ground and commence work. The Santa Teresa Gold Project in Mexico. So as I said earlier, we've just completed drilling up there. We're waiting for the assays at the moment. But what we know from the historic stuff, so we have a JORC inferred resource there of 89,000 ounces at an average grade of 7.5 grams per tonne. Now, because this is a very high grade deposit, that's based on a cap of about 20 grams a tonne in that resource calculation. If you increase that cap to 50 grams a tonne, the resource goes up to 119,000 ounces at 8.9 grams per tonne. And if you uncap it completely, 174,000 ounces at 13 grams a tonne. Now, you know, you can't have confidence in that. That's just for illustration purposes, but it certainly is a very, very high grade deposit in areas. So that's what we tried to target in our drilling here at the moment. So we've drilled both to infill around the historical resource and to drill for extensions along strike and extensions at depth. And we're waiting on those results at the moment. Hope to report them to market fairly shortly. So just summing up there, we've got multiple highly prospective projects all in tier 1 mining jurisdictions, most of them in Australia, in good mining states as well. Leveraged EV and precious metals. We have a good board, and I'll show you those guys in a minute in one of the slides. And of course, as I mentioned previously, you know, we have those assays pending in Mexico. We're ready to get on the ground at Barraba as soon as we resolve the permitting there. And as I said, I'm very, very excited about that based on the historic grades mined there and the fact that we can target the drilling very accurately to target those historic loads. And we'll have ongoing test work on the graphite as well. As I said, we're looking to optimise some of the things there, primarily tap density and yield. And then also we'll be looking to move into further resource work in the future. That's a little ways off. We'll complete the network first. And then the valuation, as I said, still fairly attractive, around about 20 million market cap. So plenty of room for upside should we get further good news. Just the board there quickly. A very qualified board, good bunch of guys for me to be working with, and they're a great support. So I feel very fortunate to have them on the team. You may know them from some other companies there. In fact, I think you know most of them from other companies actually. And then just the corporate snapshot there. So as I said, you know, market cap around about $20 million at the moment. You know, fairly tightly held there between directors, founders, and the top 40. And, you know, a recent bump in the share price off the back of the graphite announcement, and hopefully more of that to come with future good news, both on graphite and potentially Santa Teresa Gold, and then the copper projects as well. So lots of potential price catalysts, and they're sort of reasonably near term, you know, in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, basically. So, yeah, that's it from me. So